How are we doing, Jets fans? I'm Glenn Norton with Jet Nation Radio and JetNation.com. Be sure to log into JetNation.com where you can register and become a part of what is the most active Jets message board on the web. Tonight, it's myself and Chris Schubert. We are going to talk about I hate using this word, but the circus that is the New York Jets. They always find a way. Listen, you can't have a circus without a carousel, and that's what the Jets have at the QB position right now. Zach Wilson back under center, like it or not. I know a lot of people are upset by it, but let's be honest, given the options this team has, that was the right direction to go in. Tim Boyle looked completely lost out there. Trevor Simeon is not going to, talk about guys who aren't going to be a part of the future and aren't going to win you anything. That's Trevor Simeon defined. So the Jets really didn't have a choice here. Robert Saleh, who we are going to talk about at length later on, announced today that it will be Zach Wilson. Barring any injuries, it will be Zach Wilson the rest of the way. Chris, as many people have said, this is the season's lost, season's over. Team can't move the football. Deck chairs on the Titanic, all that stuff. Um, do you have any thoughts? I have no. If you say no, I don't care. I would not fault you one bit.
Glenn, I'm going to be a professional here on the show, and I do have thoughts to share. I will keep your circus theme going. This organization is a clown car right now, and they shuffle around who is driving the clown car on a regular basis. Some days it's Zach Wilson, some days it's Robert Saleh, some days it's Aaron Rodgers. It is a different person driving this clown car on a regular basis. Look, I'm tired. I'm tired of what this season has done to all of us. I went into the season and I didn't pick them to make the playoffs, but I was anticipating a team that was extremely competitive. I was expecting a team that was going to have Aaron Rodgers leading the way. And 4 plays in, that was taken from all of us. And we, on this show and in the extended Jets media family, all spent the next month and a half attempting to figure out what this team was going to do in order to salvage a season. Because 4 plays in, you can't possibly give up on what you're attempting to do. Well, guess what? Joe Douglas and the New York Jets gave up 4 plays into the season. They gave up on 2023 being anything of note for them, for the players, for the organization, for the fans, for the media, for everybody. They gave up 4 plays into the season on 2023 being anything for them. So what occurred this week with Zach Wilson, what occurred this week with Aaron Rodgers, what has occurred in the last 36 to 48 hours with Robert Saleh is all because this team, 4 plays into the season, from an organizational perspective, chose to give up on 2023. Those are my extended thoughts here to start the show.
Yeah, listen, it's a hard point to argue. I keep going back, and people can say like, "Oh, Glenn, but you like Joe D, so you're defending him," and I get all that, but I really and I've made this point before. If you look at the way Joe Douglas approached this offseason after acquiring Aaron Rodgers, it is so, and I've used this term before. It defies logic. It is so illogical, so reckless, so irresponsible for a guy who, I mean, he's it's not a win now thing because he will be back because of the injury that'll give him the mulligan. But it really was like if everyone stayed healthy, he had to win, and he did nothing at QB2. And we've rehashed this so many times, but just to drive the point home, he traded for Zach Wilson's replacement. He came out and said publicly that it was going to be a redshirt year. He came out and said publicly, we played Zach before he was ready to play. And then he didn't get someone to leapfrog him on the depth chart. That tells me Joe Douglas, and again, we've talked about this before, right? There was the report that the Jets were short of cash. A few weeks later, the Jets tell season ticket holders, we want your money 6 months early this year. We need some money. I really think they said that with where they were with the cap, with what Zach Wilson was making, with the investment they just made in Aaron Rodgers, I think they told Joe Douglas, find yourself a vet minimum quarterback who can run the offense. That's all you're getting. Because it absolutely defies logic. But that aside, the clown show that this has become. I tweeted yesterday, Chris, this team, and I'll just go off the examples off the top of my head because there's so many over the years. But it's almost like the Jets say it's not good enough to be bad. Like there's a lot of bad teams that a lot of things go wrong. But the Jets, like when they're bad, they have to do it in a way that is so embarrassing, like just to watch, whether it's Rex Ryan and the feet, or whether it's Adam Gase's introductory press conference, or whether it's, Todd Bowles. I think the final nail in his coffin was playing the Bills where they have Orton or whoever it was who hadn't played all year and comes in, he hung like 38 on him with 2 days of practice. Like, there's always got to be this thing that you look at and go, how the hell does that happen? Like, how does an NFL team allow that thing to occur? With you can look at this year with Joe Douglas, with the quarterback situation I just discussed, and the same exact thing with Bill Parcells when the Jets had Super Bowl hopes and aspirations, and they were the media darling to go to the Super Bowl after losing in the playoffs the year before. And you come into the season without a backup quarterback. And what happens? Opening day, Vinny Testaverde ruptures an Achilles. You're turning to the punter to play quarterback. I mean, and your next guy is Rick Myrer, or who didn't belong in the NFL, or Ray Lucas, who was a converted, what was he? I think he was a wide receiver in college, converted to quarterback. Like, they didn't even have a real quarterback on the roster behind Vinny Testaverde. This team has to, like, we can't just fail. We have to fail in such a spectacularly embarrassing fashion just to have our fans rip their hair out, which is what I was doing when I'm watching Joe Beningo this week go on the air and tell the world about him and Robert Saleh are best friends. And here's all the text messages that my buddy Rob sends me, and what he's going to do with this guy and the records of coaches. Like, my head almost exploded. Why Robert Saleh is an NFL head coach with 1 million children. How in the world does he have time to talk to Joe Beningo? Like, and then Beningo comes out publicly, tells the world what Saleh's been telling him, clearly misinterpreting, not the brightest guy, misinterprets what Saleh says. He comes out and makes fun of him on the air. I'm thinking, well, Saleh was an idiot to think Joe Beningo was his friend. But at least now that Joe Beningo has proven himself to be an idiot and not be a friend and air Saleh's texts, at least that's the end of that friendship. The next day, Beningo's on the, oh, Bobby called me last night. We talked for 25 minutes and we're going to go. Are you kidding? What are you doing? Like, do you not have football games and children to look after that you're talking to Joe Beningo, whose only goal in life is to say things that people will listen to stay relevant, and you're feeding him info? Dude, I'm done with Saleh. Like, I look at him and I think, like, I've always thought he was a really good guy, and I do think he's a really good guy. But I think he's such a good guy. He's like, he reminds me of a child, how little kids want everyone to be their friend. And I think Joe Douglas wants everyone to be his friend. That's why he'll play golf and share text messages and phone calls with a media type, which we'll get into that, a little bit more later on. But this blew my mind last night. First of all, it blew my mind that he was talking to him at all. And when he didn't lose his number after he aired the texts, and Robert called me last night. I was beside myself. I was like, what is this? Why are you putting 1 second of effort toward forging a friendship with Joe Beningo? I can't believe it. This is like up there with the Adam Gase introductory press conference and like how embarrassed I am by a coach. Like the Gase presser and the Robert Saleh, Joe, will you please be my friend saga. I cannot believe it. I can't believe it.
You've given me a lot to unpack here, and I will try to do my best in covering all of the bases here. If being bad was an Olympic sport and you were judged off of style points, the New York Jets would get perfect 10s from every judge, including the hardest judges at the table. That's how good the New York Jets are at being bad and getting style points at it. They find new ways. They find new rock bottoms. Every time somebody utters the phrase, this has to be rock bottom for the New York Jets, I raise my hand and say, just watch. They'll find something new. And this last week has provided that, because we've talked about the Joe Beningo stuff, and I'll share my thoughts on it here in a second. And I know we're going to talk about it here at some point on the show as well. But we haven't even touched on the Zach Wilson reluctant to play, Aaron Rodgers going on Pat McAfee, that whole saga at all in the first 10 minutes of this show. To go back to something that you said earlier, Glenn, that I think is a really important point. I agree with you to a certain extent about defending Joe Douglas on what they did up until the start of the season. If you wanted to tell me that they were just, Aaron Rodgers was going to be the starter and they were short on cash, or they had so much money tied up in their quarterback room that they weren't in a place to add a big-time backup quarterback to move Zach into the number 3 role. If you would have told me that over the summer around training camp or preseason, I would have been okay with that. But 4 plays into the season, the dynamics change. The situation changes. You have to adapt to the situations that are presented in front of you. And the New York Jets didn't do that. They chose to not do that. They chose to ride with that quarterback room. And that's where I think now I can start to put some blame on Joe Douglas. Fine, you wanted to put the rose-colored glasses on and think Aaron Rodgers was going to stay healthy. You had an expensive quarterback room as it was, but you're going to roll into the season. And yeah, maybe if you need to have Zach get you through 1 or 2 games in the middle of the season, you'd be okay with that. But 4 plays into the season, the dynamics completely change. And the fact that Joe Douglas didn't do anything about that, I think is a bad mark for him. Now, that doesn't mean I want Joe Douglas to be fired, right? I think there is a list of pros and a list of cons when you look at Joe Douglas. And if you're going to make a determination on whether you want Joe Douglas back in 2024 or not, then you have to personally do your pros list and your cons list. And I would have that on my cons list. I'm of the belief that they should completely hit the reset button and blow this whole thing up and start all over. I know they're not going to do that. So it's a waste of breath to explore that here on the show. But not every move a general manager is going to make, not every move a manager, a head coach, a player is going to make as a fan, you're going to agree with 100%. You have to understand that. So jumping on Joe Douglas of, he did this one bad thing, get him out of here. Okay, well, hold on. He's had some pretty good drafts. He's had some misses. His free agency stuff is also hit or miss. You have to take it in its totality, in its entirety, and look at the total picture and then make a determination. If after doing all of that, you want him gone, we can have that conversation, and I don't think I would necessarily fully disagree with you. So that's my thoughts on the Joe Douglas side of things. Let's get into this Joe Beningo stuff, because I'm somebody who, and again, I don't come at this from a holier than thou perspective. I think my background allows me to speak intelligently on this. I have a journalism degree, okay, from Arizona State University, one of the top journalism schools in the country. I learned this stuff. I learned how to be a member of the media. Now, I want to make one thing very clear. Joe Beningo is not a journalist. Joe Beningo is not a reporter. Joe Beningo doesn't have to protect sources the way a journalist does, the way somebody with a journalism degree does. He doesn't have that background. So when he is texting back and forth with Robert Saleh, he feels like he's got this nice, cozy, friendly relationship with the head coach of his football team that he's been rooting for forever, and he's been through all of this misery. And so when he goes on with Evan and Tiki every week after the Jets win or lose, I've watched every one of these appearances, he talks about the conversations that he's had with the coach. This isn't the first time he's brought this up, but up until this point, he hasn't gone to a level of misinterpreting something in a way that is bad for the coach. And I think that's where this becomes a problem, because he misinterpreted something and made it seem like the coach behind closed doors hates the quarterback. It becomes a big deal that Joe Beningo goes on the radio station and talks about his conversation with the coach. If he would have come on and said, I gave out the 6-point plan of what to do, and Joe kind of gave me a hard time about wanting to go back to Zach after I gave him a hard time. If he would have said that, if he would have interpreted it the correct way ahead of time, we're not having this conversation. It is all because of a misinterpretation that allows us to retroactively go back and say, maybe Joe, you shouldn't be having those conversations on the air about what you're talking about with Robert Saleh. I will tell you, I don't know why Robert Saleh is having these full-blown conversations with a member of the media right now. You got a sinking ship. You are 4-8. You've lost 5 in a row. There's a good chance that this team's going to be 4-13. I asked the question to the listeners of this show and to you, Glenn, and it's somewhat rhetorical. Is there going to be a game the remainder of the season that the New York Jets are favored in? There are 2 potential games that you can talk about, maybe against the Commanders and maybe against the Patriots. But I'm here to tell you, after what I've seen from this New York Jets team and what I've seen against New England, they are not going to be favored by Vegas on the road in New England the last week of the season. So you're banking on maybe the Commanders game. That's it. That's your chance. They're a 6.5-point dog at home to a rookie quarterback and a rookie head coach this week. You think they're going to be favored against the Commanders? They're not going to be favored against the Dolphins. They are going to be an underdog in every game the remainder of the season. They are going to finish the season more than likely with 10 straight losses. They were 4-3. They are probably going to finish the season 4-13. And we are spending our time, because this is another piece that came out of that interview that I don't think everyone is paying attention to. He's having a back and forth with Joe, sharing statistics of coaches' records when they have their quarterback or don't have their quarterback. That's what we're spending our time on, and I don't want to attack the character of Robert Saleh. I think he's a good person. I think he's got a raw deal here in New York. But you've been served a bad hand. You've been served a raw deal. You got to be able to handle it correctly. I criticized him earlier in the season to the lengths at which he was going to defend Zach Wilson when the play was that poor. I'm going to criticize him again here. You've got a sinking ship. It's a disaster. You've got reports of your quarterback that you're trying to turn back to, who's been terrible this season for you, telling you, I don't want to play, and then you have to go out and defend it. Yet you're spending time texting with members of the media. I don't understand. And for those, and I see the comment from Paul, and I can understand the sentiment of he should have been fired immediately after the leak. I don't want to go that far. I think that's unfair, because I think Joe's got to know better about what he says on the air, and I think Robert Saleh's got to know better that if he's going to have a conversation with Joe like that, he needs to clearly define what Joe is able to go on the air with. Because here's the thing, Glenn. If you know who Joe Beningo is, then you know what he does for a living, and you know that he has the weekly spot. And you know that anything you say to him could get put back on the air unless you set up the parameters ahead of time. But Joe's not a journalist, right? So he doesn't understand about setting up those parameters. And so that's where I think this all gets lost in translation. So for me, it has just been, again, that it was his turn to drive the clown car that day for 24 hours while we dealt with all of that. Because I watched it. I watched the clip that night. I think it was Monday when Joe was on. And he said it out loud. And I was like, first of all, I was like, he completely misinterpreted what Robert Saleh was saying. Even me, I don't even have a relationship with the coach, and I know what he was saying, because again, if you have some media literacy and you know about this, he goes on every week after the games with the Michael Kay show in New York. Okay, and I live and breathe this stuff. I work in radio, so I'm paying attention to all this stuff. I listen to the Michael Kay show every single day on my drive home. I listened a couple of weeks ago, and they asked him pointedly about going back to Zach, and he laughed at them, and he was like, you guys give me a hard time for weeks about Zach being the quarterback and making a change. We make a change to Tim. He's got one bad game, and now you're talking about going back to Zach. He already has said publicly that stance. So the fact that Joe got that text message in his conversation and back and forth with the coach and doesn't come to that same conclusion, you're just not paying attention. And so I think it was just it was bad by everybody. It was bad by Joe. It was bad by Robert Saleh. It was a mishandled situation. And yet here we are, December 6th. 4-8 football team, and we're talking about something that is completely unrelated to the football product on the field. Again, if it was an Olympic sport, the New York Jets would be gold medalists because they get all the style points. Perfect 10s from everybody on how to be bad.
And now going further into this, but sort of diverging off from it slightly, I did a video a couple weeks ago where I prefaced, and I'll preface it here too. Sometimes I avoid the hot takes because I hate hot takes. I hate when people say wild stuff just to kind of, when it's clearly just for clicks. And maybe if people think I'm boring because of that, that's fine. Like, I'm going to try to keep things like, yeah, I'll get into it on occasion, but I don't do like the hot takes. But one thing I said, it was either last week or the week before, during probably last week, the pre-show with you and Dylan. And I didn't say it on the air because I didn't want people to, oh, here's a hot take. But I said, we keep saying that Douglas and Saleh are safe because that's the team that lured Aaron Rodgers, and he likes them, and he's on the same page with these guys. And this is before the Joe, before the Joe Beningo thing. And I said, what if we're making that assumption that Rodgers loves these guys and wants to work with them? We don't know that Rodgers, he gets to see infinitely more than we do behind the scenes. What if he's behind the scenes going, you know what? This Saleh guy isn't really all that great. Like, he's not what I thought he was. And then we know Aaron Rodgers' feelings on the media. And he goes on Pat McAfee and says, yeah, one thing we do here is maybe we're affected a little bit too much by, what people demand, like as in we bench our quarterback because Joe Beningo wants us to. Is there something, could this, and not just this, not the Beningo thing solely, but the way the season is falling apart, the benching of the quarterbacks, the starting of the quarterbacks, the talking with the media offline to get exposed on the air, whether it's a serious content or not, you still look like an idiot coming out of that. Like, could Aaron Rodgers come out of this and have a little chat with Woody Johnson at some point and go, maybe shopping for a new head coach wouldn't be the worst idea in the world, Woody? Like, why are we assuming that there's nothing at all that Robert Saleh could do that would make Aaron Rodgers go, you know what, we can do better than this guy?
Listen, we have the answer to this question, because if you listen to Aaron Rodgers' appearance on Pat McAfee yesterday, we saw his response to this kind of stuff, because again, it's a story we haven't even discussed yet on the show, but the Zach Wilson reluctant to play, who he told, who he didn't tell, did he actually say it, the whole back and forth. Rodgers was mad. He was angry that got leaked out of the building. Now he went on his normal tirade against the media and against the Diana Rossini for her reporting, which, by the way, is probably about as sound as you can get. And I listened to her go on the Michael Kay show later that day, and she mentioned The Athletic is owned by the New York Times. And in order for her to be able to run a story, she has to have 3 sources. And the three sources have to be high-level people. It can't be, no offense to the person who works at One Jets Drive, that's the janitor, but it can't be the janitor going to her and saying, I overheard Zach Wilson say X, Y, and Z. It has to be high-ranking people. And she talked about how she spoke to multiple people within the organization that said that they had heard this. And it had been a conversation in the building for over a week at that point that he was reluctant to play. So she stands by her reporting, and he went on some tirade about that. And I disagree with him there. But the other part that he went on a big tirade about, and I do agree with him on this, he got upset at whoever leaked it. He got upset at whoever spoke to her and shared that information. And that's the kind of stuff that can force some change. Because if it did come from a coach, if it did come from a player, Aaron Rodgers does have that kind of sway. Listen, if Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh are back, it is because Aaron Rodgers is okay with them being back in 2024. End of discussion. The head coach and general manager and offensive coordinator of this football team are going to be determined by what Aaron Rodgers wants. And if Aaron Rodgers doesn't want Robert Saleh to be the head coach or Joe Douglas to be the general manager in 2024, then they will be gone. And I'm sure there will probably be a new offensive coordinator because a new head coach will come in here and want that. And I think Aaron would be okay with that if he was okay with the head coach and GM going. But it all runs through number 8. It all runs through Aaron Rodgers. He is going to be the one that makes that determination. And that's where we're at. That's how this is going to play out. Good, whether you agree with it, whether you disagree with it, whether you think it's too much power for a player who's played 4 snaps and hasn't done anything here, or you think, yep, you absolutely have to give Aaron what he wants because you have to maximize this window. Wherever you fall on that Venn diagram, that's the truth. That's how this is going to operate in 2024 in the offseason. So, again, does Aaron Rodgers look at this and say, I don't like the way Robert Saleh has handled the last couple of weeks? I don't like, because I'll tell you this, Glenn, I worry about if this continues to spiral, if the offense looks terrible again on Sunday, which probably will, and there'll be more leaks, there'll be more conversation. Does Aaron Rodgers, I don't know the man, but does Aaron Rodgers go, man, Robert Saleh doesn't run a tight ship, doesn't run a tight operation here. This needs to be better. And he makes the decision to move on. What does the next 4 weeks look like? I don't know. I don't know if he's going to look at this and say, Robert Saleh doesn't run a good organization here. He's not being a good head coach if this continues to spiral and he wants him gone. I don't know. I don't know ultimately what this looks like.
Now, speaking of, what you talked earlier about, will they be favored? Will they win any games? They probably won't. But then there is that part of me that thinks, well, with it being something that could significant, 1 or 2 wins can have huge impacts, as you know, on your draft status, your draft position. You can go from 6th to 11th or 12th with a win, especially the way so many teams are in a glut right now in that sort of outside of that top 5 where the Jets are sitting at 6. Having seen how this past week's game unfolded, again, offense was atrocious once again with Boyle and Simeon under center. But I will say, and I don't, maybe you disagree, Chris. But I thought, and Rich Cimini said, yeah, he felt the same way. And he, once Simeon came in Atlanta, just went all out with the heavy blitzes. It changed. But those first 3 quarters, as I'm watching that game, I'm thinking, this is, again, not great. But I'm like, this is some of the best pass pro we've seen maybe this year from this team, because you had some guys back from injury. Carter Warren, I think I haven't watched the all 22. I was going to do that tonight. Has been good, not great. He did give up a sack late, but again, that was when Atlanta was just going all out and bringing the house. Schweitzer is back. Becton was back. So if the protection holds up, and the curious thing is going to be Zach Wilson. Like, if he didn't want to play and he's playing anyway, he might just go, you know what, dude, you call whatever plays you want. I'm going to run what I like. What are you going to do, bench me? What are you going to do, cut me? Like, please do. Please let me go. So does Zach Wilson just, because I think that's one common thread we've seen with the Jets quarterbacks this year under Hackett, is that they're either, to be fair to Hackett, they're either the most clueless quarterbacks I've ever seen in my life, or they are the most cautious quarterbacks I've ever seen in my life. They don't take a shot. They don't take a chance. Like, if you're not wide open, I'm taking the sack. Does Zach Wilson come out and say, you know what, pass pro's not terrible, and I'm just going to let it rip, and then win a couple games down the stretch, and you think you just went from the 5th or 6th pick to 12th or 13th?
Yeah, so I have a lot of thoughts on Zach returning to the lineup, and I really want to discuss the whole report of him being reluctant to play, because I would love to share my thoughts. I've been relatively quiet about it up until this point. But when it comes to Zach playing on Sunday, look, Nathaniel Hackett has the ultimate job security between now and the end of the season. They are not going to make a change with 4
Oh, no.
games to
No,
go,
he's the safest guy in the
5 games to
building.
go, whatever it is. And you have Robert Saleh going to the podium and asked about why he won't make a change of play caller, and he basically tells everybody, "You'll see when you see the all 22." Saying out loud, guys are open.
Yeah.
Tim Boyle and Trevor Siemian aren't pulling the trigger. They're not throwing the ball. Well, guess what? If I hear that, if I'm Zach Wilson and I hear that, right, and I've been benched again, 3rd time in 2 seasons I've been benched. I'm going out there and I'm ripping it. You know what? I dare you if I throw 4 picks to sit me down for Trevor Siemian.
Yeah.
I dare you.
What are you going to do?
I dare you. And again, this isn't a defensive Zach. I'm done with that platform. I'm done with that position. If I'm Zach Wilson, you literally have nothing more to lose as a New York Jet. I'm going out there. I'm throwing it into the tightest windows there are. I'm throwing every 50-50 ball up for Garrett Wilson. I am zipping it in there. I don't care if I throw 6 interceptions in the first half. I don't care. I am going to make this organization sit me down again for Trevor Siemian, because the moment they do that, the moment they decide to bench Zach again, everybody back in the clown car. Everybody pile back in. We'll have another week of this. So if I'm Zach, and truly behind the scenes I was reluctant to play, I am going to put this coaching staff, who maybe has done me wrong this season, in a position to say, you know what? This isn't me. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to play my style of football. And by the way, if you're Nathaniel Hackett, could we just please just open it up? Could we just please not call? You're 4-8. You're not going anywhere. Aaron Rodgers isn't coming back. This season is over. Could you maybe show me something? Because if over the last 5 weeks you can show me something with Zach, if you can show me that you can open it up, that you can adjust, okay, maybe I can start to convince myself that 2024 is going to be different than how it currently is in my head. But you've got nothing to lose. Zero. Unless you're afraid you are going to get fired, which then, if that fear does exist, then why hasn't there been a move in the first place? See, that's where I can't. If Nathaniel Hackett's job security is what we think it is because of who the quarterback is, then just let it fly. Just call plays. Just be laid back, be casual about it. Call plays. Everybody knows the quarterback situation at this point. Everybody knows what this is going to look like. So I'm letting it rip. I'm throwing the ball 35, 40 times. I'm throwing it to the tightest windows there are. I'm throwing every 50-50 ball to Garrett Wilson. I am just going out there and I'm playing like it's BYU and I'm playing Coastal Carolina or I'm playing Houston. I don't care. I'm letting it rip. I'm rolling out of the pocket, just slinging it across my body. I'm doing everything you're not supposed to do. I'm just going out there and playing football. That's what I'm doing.
I said to you and Dylan a couple weeks ago, I can't remember if it was on air or pre-show or post-show, but that I think that might be, excuse me, when Zach moves on, that might be his best chance. He's got to go to a team that says, just play your game. Do what you do.
Can I tell you the worst?
He's a different quarterback than he was even his rookie year. Go back to his rookie year. He's a different guy now.
Can I tell you
and
the
I think
worst
that guy
thing?
had a better chance to succeed than this guy.
The worst thing for the New York Jets is if he has that mentality switch and he goes out there and he plays well. Because I'm going to have a lot of tough questions about this coaching staff and this room of how they didn't go to this sooner. Now, again, statistically, probability-wise, it's not likely, right? He hasn't been playing that great. But if it does happen...
we're not even saying great. If he goes out and throws 2 touchdowns and they win the football game, you're going to be like, wait a minute. He hasn't thrown 2 touchdowns in 3 months.
Right. And you're gonna have a lot of questions. Can we touch on the report about him being reluctant to play and all that stuff?
Yes, please. I was going to touch on that too. Go ahead.
So two things are allowed to be true at the same time, and I think this has been lost on a lot of people. 2 things are allowed to be. This is my brand on the show. 2 things are allowed to be true at the same time.
Yep.
You can be pro Zach for how he, if it's true, which again, by the way, we don't know if he actually said it. I know Diana Rossini's reporting it, and I based on everything I've heard about her reporting, and she's been interviewed about it, I believe her reporting, but we don't know. Everybody else is denying it. Rodgers, Saleh, Wilson, other team, like everybody's denying that it took place. But if it did take place, and the position was, and Diana Rossini, confirmed this even more so, that it wasn't just about getting hurt, that it was more about like the yo-yoing that has occurred with him being the starter, not being the starter. We believe in you. We don't believe in you. Just a back and forth. And the moment that he was benched and made the 3rd string, it was over for him in New York. And now 2 weeks later, they're going back to him. And so he feels some type of way about that. You can be pro Zach in that regard. And I am. Like, if I'm Zach Wilson, and this is gonna rub a lot of people the wrong way, but if I'm Zach Wilson, I've got some blame in this, but this organization has some blame in this as well. Because guess what? This organization and this head coach allowed teammates last year, while he was the starting quarterback, to wear Mike White shirts on a team plane.
Yeah,
That was allowed. That was allowed to occur.
that
Whatever
was
you think of
horrible.
that, that was allowed to occur. And all we've heard is this kid's got confidence issues, and his confidence gets shaken. Okay, you're the head coach. You know, and again, you may think he, that Zach's being coddled or whatever. But if he's got confidence issues as a head coach, how do you let that happen? How do you let players wear Mike White shirts on a team plane? How do you let that happen? How
That
do
was
you
that was
how do
I
you
mean,
do
listen, and I was a big Mike White guy, but that was you don't do that, man.
right? So that happened. So this idea of it's an opportunity for Zach to show himself. Absolutely 100% agree. But this idea that he's got to do it for his teammates. Well, guess what? His teammates hung him out to dry last year. Let's not forget what occurred. They
Yeah,
didn't want him to be the quarterback. They didn't want him to be on this team. Like so it goes both ways. So that can be true, but also what can be true is the New York Jets can't allow that to be the mindset. And if that truly was his mindset and he was reluctant to play, then they needed to cut him or suspend him. That's what they
and that's
needed to do.
and I listen, I know Robert Saleh, I don't know how many sentences he speaks per year that are true publicly, but when he comes out and says if Zach's reluctant, he wouldn't be here.
Right.
I believe that. I
I
don't. You
believe him.
can't let that. I mean, I mean, it's bad enough that they didn't hold Zach accountable for his play earlier in his career and bench him sooner. But keeping a guy around who's like, I don't want to play, I don't want to put myself at risk when 52 other guys are doing it, you've got to ship him out. And that's why I think, and I've heard a few people pitch the theory. I'm not saying Zach Wilson didn't say it. I'm think he probably said something like, "Oh Jesus, like what a disaster. I hope I don't go out there and get hurt, or I hope I don't get scapegoated again if we keep struggling." And then someone else goes, "Oh, he doesn't want to play. He's
Or
reluctant. I'm gonna pass that along." And then 10 minutes later, by the way, Tim Boyle gets cut. Just putting that out there.
or or it's brought up to him and his natural reaction is like, "Guys, what are we doing here? I'm the starter now. I'm not the starter. Like you're putting me in a terrible spot. You're making this difficult for me. You benched me. You told me I was done here. You told me my time and my era was over here. And now 2 weeks later, you're coming back to me. Like explain to me how this is going to be different this time. That's a reasonable reaction for somebody to have. If you work at a job and you're on a project and the project's not going that great, and your boss takes you off the project, okay, you're going to be kind of down in the dumps. You don't expect 2 weeks later for your boss to be like, yeah, you really sucked at that project, but Tim didn't do that great, so we want to bring you back to the project. Yeah, it's your job and you're going to do it, but in the back of your mind, you're going to be like, whoa, wait a minute. You took me off this thing. You now want me back? That's not how this goes. You got to explain to me what's going to be different this time around, because in 2 weeks, am I going to be taken back off the project again and be made to
Yeah,
be the bad guy? Like
yeah,
this, like I just, again, this is not a defense of Zach. If he did truly say it and he was truly reluctant to the point where he really didn't want to play, then the Jets should have cut him or moved on from him. Where I think we meet in this happy medium is he might have expressed the sentiment of, we're going to do this again, really? Like this is what we're going to do? And it was conveyed in a reluctant
ex-
manner.
exactly.
And then after getting together and meeting and having a meeting of the minds, Zach was like, no, I'll play. Like I don't get what we're doing here, but I'll play. Of
Yeah,
course I'm going to play.
yeah.
That's
That's the
probably what
thing.
ended up
I think
happening.
he probably said something. He was probably frustrated about it. Said,
Wouldn't
this
you?
this is
Wouldn't you be
BS, or
frustrated?
you play me or don't. Part of it too. He could be sitting there, and saying, how many times did Robert Saleh tell everyone I'm the best quarterback on this roster? Not that he's good. And
No.
even me, even when I said bench Zach, I was at that point where I was like, just to shut everyone up, because there were people who believe these other guys are better than him. Fine, because
Yeah.
you're like, you're not scoring any touchdowns anyway, so it doesn't matter. Let's see Tim Boyle and let's see if he's better than Zach.
He
And
wasn't,
like
by
I
the way.
said, Zach more physically talented, higher ceiling, but yeah, the offense has been a disaster this year. There's no getting around that. But the fact that the team was willing to sit him when they themselves knew he was the better option, and again, best of a bad bunch. I'm not. That's you say he's the best of the group, and people are like, but he sucks. Again, the two things, right? He can suck, and the other guys can suck worse.
Right.
So
And
both true.
again, I want to make something very clear, because if this does get clipped out and gets put out on social media, I want to make something very clear. You can understand Zach's position, which I do. If his position was, you really want me to go back out there? Really, we're going to do this all over again after I've been the scapegoat multiple times during the season. You can understand that point of view while also understanding that it is a bad look. And if it truly reached the point where he said, no, I'm not playing, then the team needs to do something about it. Both of those things are allowed to be true.
Yeah, and that's kind of like Mikey's saying here in the chat that is it Salah saying here, take a look at these guys, and you'll see why Zach's been starting. And I don't. That's not. I think that's something. If Saleh had pulled Zach aside and said, "Look, I'm not. This is going to be short
I,
term. I'm going to pull you. I'm going to let everyone else see what I mean when I say you're better than them, and then you're back in 2 weeks." I
I'm
know that's
sorry.
not what happened. That would have been a better way to do it because I
If
think these guys failing was kind of inevitable.
if that occurred, and I try not
Like
to be
I don't
hot
think
take
it did.
guy.
I think that would have been the way to go about it.
Sure, I don't like to be hot takey guy on this show, right? I like to come with very nuanced opinions. We
Yes.
like to live in the space of fleshing ideas out. If truly, and again, I don't think this occurred either, because if it did, what I'm about to say is going to make a ton of sense. If Robert Saleh said, you know what, I'm tired of hearing all this nonsense. I'm tired of hearing all this noise. I'm going to show you guys. I'm going to sit down Zach Wilson and I'm going to play these other two guys. I'm sorry, Glenn. That's a fireable offense. It is a fireable offense to say, I know that these other two quarterbacks stink, but just to stick it to the fans and to show the fans that Zach's not the problem, I'm going to put these other two bad quarterbacks in and completely just give up on 2 games because again, you know that they're not as good as Zach. To me, that's a fireable offense. Fireable.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, but I think even with Zach, they weren't. I don't feel like he was giving up wins. I think they would have lost
Right,
anyway.
but
But
you're
I see what you
knowing
mean. You can't.
you're knowingly playing
It's
guys that you
that's
know
something
are
you do.
worse.
That's something you do when you're mathematically eliminated.
Right.
Keep them in there and say, all right, season's over. We're going to see what we have in these guys. Oh, look, they're worse than Zach, so we'll go back to Zach. That would have been a better way to put it.
You're
But
knowingly putting a worse quarterback on the field just to prove a point.
well, he knowingly put a worse quarterback on the field, regardless of the reason he did it. He's been saying all year, Zach gives us the best chance. And even today, Zach gives us the best chance. So
Clown car.
the guy who gives you the best chance to win is going to start on Sunday, but the dude you started over him, you just cut. So in a matter of 4 days, you went from this guy's better than Zach to he's not even worthy of a roster spot. So I think I do wonder. That's why I mentioned Aaron Rodgers earlier. I wonder if that's what he's talking about when he says, we're reacting too much to outside pressure. And I think Saleh did to some degree, sort of hearing it at every game. Are you going to bench Zach? Are you going to bench Zach? But at the same time, they ask him every week if he's gonna make a change at offensive coordinator. And listen, I get that some guys are running open. I didn't watch the All 22 this week, but when I've watched, I think just about every week. I don't think there's any weeks I haven't. Like I said, this week I didn't, and there was one week I know I watched it really late. But I'm not seeing it. You're seeing. Listen, it's an NFL football game with NFL receivers. Guys are going to get open sometimes. But it's not like the quarterback has a chance to get in a rhythm with like 4, 5, 6 plays in a row, guys getting open. There's a lot of, drop back, hit that last, that back foot hits, the ball's supposed to come out, and there's nowhere to go with it. And then you're scrambling and trying to buy time, and then you're getting sacked or whatever. And if Saleh's going to try to pretend that guys are just running freely open all around the field, that's not happening. And here's a stat for you, random stat to mention, because I looked this up earlier because it was really bothering me. The fact that Jeremy Ruckert is getting no attention this year, no targets. Jets quarterbacks have thrown 414 passes this year, 17 of them to Jeremy Ruckert.
Glenn,
17.
I'm tired. This team has worn me down.
They have they have one wide receiver, and they
down.
won't target the tight end. I mean, Conklin has more than I realized. Conklin statistically won't have a terrible year at the pace he's on, but Ruckert has to be involved in this more. Not that it matters. Again, they're not going anywhere. They have another offseason to work on it. Are they going to be picking 6th, 7th, 13th? I mean, I want them to be 6th or 7th and trade down, honestly. I mean,
That would
Marvin
be
Harrison
nice.
Jr. ain't making it to 7.
That'd be nice. I'd like them to be in the top 4 to take a quarterback personally, but
it'd be nice, but I just don't think they do it. And I think you got to be in the top 3. Who are you taking it? Well, I guess if Harrison's going in the top 3.
So I think what you're going to see in the top 3 are the 2 quarterbacks, Caleb Williams and Drake May,
right?
Marvin Harrison Jr.
3,
and then
Jaden Daniels
in some order, probably one of the tackles like Joe Alt, Olufushanu, the top offensive lineman's probably going to be in the mix there at 4. So that would be Mikey. Go look at the free agents that are available. The Jets could have upwards of like $90 million in cap space. There's some high quality. You really, really, truly. I love Joe Alt. I love Olufushanu. Really, you truly want to bank 2024 on a rookie tackle. That's what you want to do?
I think they're going to.
That's what you want to do.
Tackle or receiver. I think it's gonna be tackle or receiver and a quarterback later on, a project quarterback on
Again,
day 2 or 3.
I'm only entertaining the idea of quarterback if they're picking with inside the top 4, because then I think it's a realistic possibility. I don't want
Right.
Jaden Daniels. I don't want Bo Nix inside the top 10 or top 15 or whatever the case may be, right? Like, I don't want to take those guys in that spot. If you're in the top 4, then yeah, I think you're going to have to consider it if a guy falls to you. And it's possible. The team might take Marvin Harrison, and then, another team might take Joe Alt, and so one of the quarterbacks falls to you, or you move up, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, and
Again, I
remember,
don't think it's
Mikey, I
likely,
tweeted this
but
earlier. I know we all get so caught up in the first round picks that like there are picks outside of that round. I know the Jets don't have a 2. They may have to trade down for 1. I pitched the other day. I know the guys didn't like it,
don't
trading back
don't
into the first or second round. You need picks. You need to win
Glenn,
now.
Glenn, you
Win now.
cannot. You
The window is
cannot.
this big.
No, it's not. See,
It's
this
this
is where you're
big.
wrong. This is where you're wrong. The window is not this big. The window is only this big because of Aaron Rodgers. It's
Right.
not actually this big. Garrett Wilson, young player. Sauce Gardner, a young player. Jermaine Johnson, Quinn Williams. These are all young players. These are players that are going to have probably 5, 6, 7-year careers with the New York Jets. They're going to be here for a really, really, really long time. There's a big window here.
Some of them are going to go. They're not
Stop
going to be
trading
able
the
to afford to keep all
2025
those guys.
pick. Okay,
You
how
know?
about this?
Who goes? Who goes?
I'm
The
going
4
to.
guys you just named. Who do you trade?
So here is the question that I have for you, and I hate to do this, but I'm going to put you on the spot. Do you think a major name on this team demands out this offseason?
I said it the other day. I do so much talking about this team. I forget. I Garrett Wilson was the guy I mentioned. I said, Garrett Wilson looks exhausted. Like, would anyone be surprised if he says, you know what, I'm like, send me somewhere else. I want to go. Or if these guys, if 1 or 2 or 3 of them, that's the problem with having 3 first round picks and hitting on all of them because they could all the same year. I always say that 5th-year option is garbage. If that 5th-year option is only good if the player isn't that good. Because if the player's that good, he's demanding a contract before that time comes up. What if you're Joe Douglas and Sauce, Garrett Wilson, and Jermaine Johnson all come to you after next year and say, we're ready. We each need our $30 million a year. That's $90 million on 3 guys.
It's tough. It's tough. This is.
Seriously. Again,
No, I know.
not a hot take. Honest, dead. Swear to God, not a hot take. I don't see how you keep all those guys.
It's going
because Quinn Williams is still. He ain't going anywhere.
No,
So you're gonna have Quinn Williams. You're gonna have 4 guys making $30 million a year.
Well, hold on, because they pay.
I know there's
people,
wrangling and maneuvering,
right?
but
So
4 is a lot.
We can do some things with void years and stuff to get a little creative with it, and so they'll definitely do that. Yeah, I am on record that I am concerned about them just deciding to run it back in 2024. I think that would be a disaster. I don't think people's expectations should be very high if that's the case. This team's got way too many problems to think that they are just an Aaron Rodgers return away from being the team that look at all the teams that had a down year this year. The Bills might not.
You know what and listen, I shouldn't do this to myself because I had a really good stretch of 7 or 8 years where I was really good about having no expectations with this team. And the damn Aaron Rodgers thing pulled me back in. I got to get back to where I expect nothing no matter what.
Yeah, you should expect nothing for 2024 and be happy when
forever.
Yeah,
It's been nothing for 30, however many years I've been watching, 37 years.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. But I still do think, let's say, like, we still don't know what's going to happen with Becton. I know Samini said he thinks Becton goes. Let's say, hypothetically, you tag Becton. He stays healthy again next year.
No. I'm going to stop you right here. I'm going to stop you right here. The New York Jets cannot walk into 2024 expecting Mekhi Becton to be one of their starting offensive linemen. They cannot walk into 2024 expecting Elijah Vera Tucker to be one of their starting offensive linemen. What about those two guys' histories? And I know Becton's been better this year, but what about those injury profiles tell you that you can see? This is the problem I have with what they're trying to do. Because if they go into 2024 and they just go, oh, Elijah Vera Tucker, Mekhi Becton, those guys are out there. Look how well it did for you in 2023. Joe Douglas has been attempting to rebuild the offensive line since he got here. How's that working out for him?
But this is my point. This is why I'm saying if you bring those guys back and add through the draft, so your depth isn't a disaster next year if those guys don't make it through a full season. So I have no problem. I think their first round pick is going to be a receiver or a tackle. I wouldn't have an issue with
Brock
quarterback. What's that?
Or Brock Bowers.
Again. Well, I think they're going to be picking high. Like, Bowers to me is like a guy I take at 7, 8, 9. At 3, 4, 5, I would take a quarterback, but I think they take a tackle. So you're talking a tackle, then get a guard later on. And again, there are some free agents free agent class isn't great, but the
Sign Jonah
draft
Williams
class
to
is
play
deep.
tackle. Kick Elijah Vera Tucker back inside the guard. I fixed your problem.
Well, yeah, and that would be part of the plan is have, again, it didn't work because of the injury this year, but I do the same thing where I have him as a guard, but also have him earmarked. Like if another damn tackle gets hurt, AVT is a consideration. Again, depending on who you bring in. But I think we're going to see them bring some of these guys back, and we're going to see them add some through draft and free agency. The problem is the thing they ran into this year is they didn't have 14 offensive linemen, and
But
they won't have 14 next year.
but Glenn,
But if you can come in with eight good linemen and a couple of backups, but you got to get some through the draft.
but hold on, because while yes, the offensive line injury luck has not been on the New York Jets side.
It's been
Elijah
horrendous.
Elijah Vera Tucker has been hurt every year of his career.
Yeah.
Mekhi Becton's been hurt a lot. It shouldn't be a surprise if those two guys get hurt. Like it's like the Mets.
Vera Tucker he played 1 year, he got hurt 1 year. He was never hurt in college.
Right,
It's not like he had a long history of being injured.
The New York Mets just signed Luis Severino to. I'm gonna make a cross sport reference here. They just signed Luis Severino to a 1 year, $13 million deal. He's been hurt a lot in his career. That would be like the New York Mets going into the season going, oh, Luis Severino is going to make 34 starts for the New York. That's ridiculous. That would be absurd to expect that. You have contingency plans in place. This team needs to have contingency plans in place.
Yeah.
Sign Jonah Williams. Kick Elijah Vera Tucker back inside to guard. Listen, Glenn, we keep talking about them having a first round pick. That thing might be in Vegas to get Devontae Adams. Like let's
Don't know.
Let's make sure that the picks
can't do that.
This is the guy that wants to trade
Again,
the 2025 pick.
We just talked about these guys. Sauce and these guys are going to be asking for a new deal after next year. You're gonna have him and Quinnen, and then try to sign Sauce, Garrett Wilson, Jermaine Johnson.
I'm not saying what I would do. I'm just telling you that it's a possibility. They should just sign T. Higgins.
Yeah, sign Mike Evans. Grab a free agent.
I'm here to tell you. Do you know who's a free agent that if he doesn't re-sign before the end of the season and he's available and you know the guy who Aaron Rodgers needs?
Who's that?
Go sign Michael Pittman Jr.
Yeah.
Go sign Michael Pittman Jr. Dude's a stud.
Yeah.
Go get that guy.
Yep. There will be options out there. I feel like receiver. It's again the Jets find a way to have no depth at a position where there's just a plethora of talent. The receivers are there's so many talented receivers around the league nowadays.
That's why you don't take a Brock Bowers or a Marvin. You don't do that in the first round when you have 47 other needs on your roster.
You can line Brock Bowers. You can line him up out wide. Look at him out jump. He's got leaping, jumping, spinning catches over corners.
Glenn, this team needs at least three starting offensive linemen. They need 2 wide receivers. They need They need 2 safeties. Like they probably need at least 1 linebacker. Like they've got
one. The safety thing is,
2 safeties.
Ashton Davis is playing well.
They need 2 safeties.
They need at least 1.
They need 2 safeties.
I mean, they don't need 2 starters. I think Tony Adams is coming along well. I think you need to replace Jordan Whitehead for sure.
The shopping list is very long.
Here's what it comes down to: like, you're not going to replace 26 guys in one offseason. Like, they have a lot of guys that you could win with as they are if you upgrade the key positions. Again, the O-line's got to be fortified. You got to do something on the defensive interior in terms of being able to stop the run. Solomon Thomas, super nice guy. Walter Payton, Man of the Year, great. Not that great of a player. I would not be against a DT and on day, if you add a second round pick through a trade, a DT in the second or third round. Give me somebody like Sweat out of Texas, who I've mentioned, or McKinley out of Texas A&M, 2 guys I really like. Yeah, they have some work to do. But
they play a game this week, Glenn.
What's that?
They play a game this week. There's a game that the Jets
are do when Tank Dell is out. So look, I don't even know if I want the wins at this point.
I want them. This team needs. They cannot lose. They cannot lose 10 in a row to end the season. There'd be a mutiny. Because here's why they can't do it, Glenn. Because they cannot. Let me just back up a second. They can do whatever they want. It's their organization. They're running it like a circus. So they're going to do whatever they want anyway. If you, and I'm saying this now to all of the lovely listeners of the show so they can hear me on record. You go 4-13. You lose the final 10 to the season, and you bring back the GM, you bring back the coach, you bring back the offensive coordinator, and you bring back Aaron Rodgers, if you just completely run it back, I have zero expectations for you in 2024. None. If
Well,
you go 4-13 and you just
mhm.
run this thing back, I'm sorry, I'm out. I'm out.
Well, I mean, you say run it back. If you add significant pieces in free agency in the
No,
draft,
no,
it's not.
because this coaching staff cannot get it done.
Well, again, you got to like the defensive coaching staff.
I didn't say the defensive
Offensive,
coordinator. I didn't.
offensive.
Jeff Ulbricht's name. Jeff Ulbricht's going to be getting head coaching interviews this offseason. So you got to hope that
Should he
he.
get a Jets head coaching interview?
No, they need an offensive minded coach if they fire
Yeah, that's true.
Saleh. They should hire Ben Johnson,
Yeah,
Lions offensive coordinator.
I like what we've
Bobby
talked about.
Slowick, the Texans offensive coordinator.
Give me
Kellen Moore,
what's
the
his name?
Chargers offensive
Baltimore.
coordinator. Todd
they almost-
Monken, the Ravens offensive coordinator.
That's
We got a lot of
that's what I was
options.
talking about. That's he was supposedly the guy they liked until Peyton Manning called and told him to hire Adam Gase.
I can't, Glenn. I'm tired. Okay, I said it earlier. I'm tired. You cannot be doing that to me right now.
I'll tell you what. I hate to say it, and I said this to you at the top, or off the air. I'm almost glad that the circus came to town this week because without it, what the hell would we have talked about?
We joked about re-airing our show from last week. We joked about it.
Score a touchdown. We can do a 5-minute video where we say the Jets. We can describe the Jets losing a close game and not scoring. Just don't say the name of the opponent, and then we can run that episode every week and be like, "Oh, this Sunday the Jets didn't score a touchdown." And yeah, defense played well, gave up some points late, and Zach Wilson didn't throw any touchdowns. Boy, it was a tough one. See you next week.
Oh, we've got 5 more of these, man.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Hopefully we find out Joe Douglas is texting Mike Francesa next week, and we'll have something else to talk about because I can't believe he's best friends with Joe Beningo. It's mind-boggling. Francis says get Harbaugh.
No,
what do you think of Harbaugh?
Absolutely not.
I don't think Rodgers would stand for it. And I told someone I mentioned this to Dylan. I think again I talk so much about this team. I forget what I say to who, but I talked to somebody. And I made this clear. I never pretend the fake sources. The fake source. I cannot believe how gullible people on Twitter are. There are people I know, like there's some people like I know a little bit personally who like I know they're making stuff up and they just say like people in the building are telling me and they get like 1 billion retweets and people are like celebrating it. Oh, thank God this is gonna happen. And I'm like, people believe this stuff? Like the making up of fake sources and how quickly people go for it. But here's and this isn't even really this was just a conversation in passing. I had a buddy who knew someone in the national media, and he's a Jets fan too. But we were just BS and talking football, and this was right after Harbaugh left San Francisco, and he said, "Oh, by the way, I spoke to so and so, and like they're in disarray. Like Harbaugh left that place a complete mess. Like they don't know what to do." And remember, I think they went out and hired some coach who wasn't really. Never been a coach, and
Jim Tom Sula, I think, came in.
They panicked and they freaked out. Yeah, he was like Harbaugh left that place in shambles. So there's my inside scoop, but it's it's from 8 years ago and it's not Jets related. The people that make stuff up, man. I say I don't get it, but I guess I get it because you see these people that like they show up on Twitter one day and like 3 weeks later they have 50,000 followers and they're just making up all these stories.
Why make stuff up when you can just text the coach and get it yourself?
Yeah, I'm just gonna shoot Robert. You just got to go to the right golf courses. I think Saleh's a big golfer.
That's it.
Go out there, shout from one hole to the other.
The Jets lose. They lose to the Texans. I feel like we never do this, and at the end of the show, I have to jam in my prediction. The Jets lose to the Texans. They score like 9 points. They can't move the ball on offense. They lose 17-9 this week.
Zach Wilson throws 6 touchdowns. He comes out fearless and said he changes every single play. Even if he comes up to the line and he likes the call, he's like,
no, he checks it anyway. Yeah, he checks it anyway. Yep.
Run up the middle. They got 2 guys in the box. We're throwing it. Yeah. Listen. I mean, you have to pick the Jets to lose. You have to pick a 13-9 type score. But these are the types of games that like bad teams tend to lose. Like just enough happens where like the team is like, us against the world and everyone's making fun of us. And like I said, the biggest thing to me was that the O-line looked okay-ish last week. And that would be a big factor. We got Dom C chiming in. I will be on his show in a few hours, actually, talking a little bit of draft.
Do you ever sleep?
Harbaugh, what's that?
Do you ever sleep? You're going on another show?
Well,
It's like
not a
2 in the
whole
morning
lot.
for you.
It's midnight here. I do work nights, so I'll be doing Dom. It'll be 2 a.m. my time when we kick off. But Dom saying Harbaugh is definitely coming. That's my feeling. He's going to want a young QB. That's a big factor, and he's going to
Chargers,
want
probably.
exactly. So he's going
Chargers.
to have to go to a place where there's no real GM, where there's about to not be a GM.
The
And I don't think
Chargers.
I think Joe Douglas is safe. I think Joe Douglas should, as you said earlier, Chris. It's got to be the totality. I think the free agency stuff with Joe Douglas hasn't been great.
No.
But if you just look at some of the guys, like,
Well, hold
a
on,
lot
Tyler.
of really good players.
Like Tyler Conklin's a good signing. DJ Reed was okay. Like he's got some. There are some. There's some
again,
good. There's some good
better
ones in there.
QB play. I think Conklin's looking like a much better signing. But listen, claiming John Franklin Myers and Quincy
Right.
Williams, like those are huge.
He's got some good moves.
I mean, there are several guys on this roster. If you talk about Garrett Wilson, Sauce, Jermaine Johnson, the way Quincy's playing right now. These guys, like, they play like this for a few years, and we're talking about them as being like some of the best players the team's ever had. And he's brought all these guys in a short time frame. And people point to his first draft, like, that's why Dylan and I know you couldn't join us that night, right? We did that show. We went through every single pick because I think fantasy football and Madden has ruined people's perspective on what NFL drafts really look like.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there are fans who legitimately think, like, every class you should get like 4 starters and a couple of backups.
Yeah, it's not how it
And
works,
it's not
man.
reality. You get a couple of starters and 1 to 2 backups, and you're okay. That's right around 50%, and that's where the best GMs tend to live, in that territory. And Joe Douglas, I think he's slightly below that right now, but that's if you can't really count this year's class. They haven't played a lot, and I think that the top 4 picks in this year's class, I think, will be at the very least good players. I think McDonald's going to be phenomenal, but I think you got 4 players in this year's class, and he's nobody hits on 80% of their picks, and I think that's what some people want.
I said it earlier. I'm tired. There's only so much energy that I can devote to this team and just what they do on a regular. And just when I thought I was putting it into cruise control. And again, I still do a ton of research and work for the show, but I was going to put it in cruise control. Okay, it's over. They're 4-8. The final 5 games. We'll just kind of just coast and just see where this. Nah, we have this week. This was fun.
Yeah,
this was a blast.
That's the thing. It's always got to be a spectacularly embarrassing collapse when they do the things they do, letting the team wear the T-shirt of the quarterback who's being brought in to bench the draft pick. Who does that? The Jets do that. That's who does that. That's going to do it for this week, folks. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for the comments, the engagement. Check out Project Prospect with Dom C. I'll be on there later talking interior defensive linemen in a few hours. I'm sure he'll air that in a couple days. Check that out. And Sunday, Jets, Texans. Like I said, got to pick the Texans to win. 13-9 Texans. But let's see Zach Wilson come out, throw some touchdowns. Let it rip. Block up front, linemen. Keep them upright. Have a good one, Jets fans.